Hello. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Stockwell. I'm 72 years old and part of Bernie Sanders' political revolution, meaning that until now, I've never engaged in the political process in a big way. This is the first time that I've been enthusiastic enough about a candidate to put a bumper sticker on my car, a sign on my lawn, knock on doors, and wear this t-shirt in airports. Why am I so enthusiastic? Because this senator is the real deal. He has honesty and integrity. My daughter is a resident of Vermont and tells me that he gets elected again and again by higher percentages every time because he walks his talk. He does what he says he's going to do. 2, he cares about us older folks. He is one of us, you know. We can trust Bernie to work to leave this country and world in good shape for our grandchildren. I'm asking 3 things of you today. 1, listen. Listen carefully to what Bernie says is wrong in our country. I have not heard one press person or one other candidate from either party argue that the things that Bernie points out are not true. And not one other candidate has pledged to earnestly and vigorously fight to right those wrongs. 2, when you leave here enthusiastic about Bernie today, and you will, tell people about him. Tell people that there is hope for our democracy. 3, vote. Please, please vote on February 9th and give other seniors rides to the polls. It's crucial. Lastly, I just finished rereading Granny D's book. Remember our own Doris Haddock? Our own Doris Haddock, who walked across our great country at age 90 for campaign finance reform. Bernie is going to do his utmost to reverse the disastrous Citizens United ruling that was such a blow to Granny's cause. I feel proud and confident. I feel proud and confident to put this symbolic torch of Granny D's into the hand of the next President of the United States, the one and only Bernie Sanders.
Well, let me thank all of you. This is a wonderful turnout, and I appreciate all of you being here. And Mary, thank you very much for those generous words, and thank you very much for this. You know, Granny D, a heroine from the state of New Hampshire, played a very important role in reminding this country that democracy is about one person, one vote, not about billionaires buying elections. And that's a lesson that I have absorbed very strongly. Now, interestingly enough, as I received this today, today is, as I understand it, the 6th anniversary of one of the worst Supreme Court decisions made in the history of our country, and that was by a 5-4 decision. Supreme Court said to the wealthiest people in this country, to the millionaires and billionaires, in the Citizens United case, they said, you already own, as very wealthy people, much of the economy. Now we are going to allow you to purchase the United States government. Now here in New Hampshire and in Vermont, we understand that what democracy is about is people sitting today in meetings like this, arguing about the issues, and then voting one person, one vote. Billionaires do not have more influence than middle class or working people. One person, one vote. So in memory of Granny D, in recognition that today is the 6th anniversary of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court case, let me say very clearly that no nominee of mine to the United States Supreme Court will get that nomination unless he or she is firm in saying they will vote to overturn that disastrous decision. You know, maybe coming from New England, I have a passionate belief in democracy. People with different points of view, arguing about what they believe in. And then at the end of the day, majority rules. And I am deeply worried about the direction of American democracy today when we have one of the lowest voter turnouts in the world. I want to see this country have one of the highest voter turnouts in the world. I want to see people, whether they're progressive, moderate, conservative, be able to run for office and win or lose based on their ideas, not on the amount of money they've attracted from the wealthiest people in this country. So Granny D, thank you very much. The work that you did in your lifetime was not in vain. We will overturn Citizens United. Let me just say a few words. I want to focus this morning on senior issues, frankly, which do not get enough attention in the political life of this country. But before I get there, I want to say a few words about our campaign and some of the issues that I believe are of most importance to the American people. As many of you know, when we began this campaign about 9 months ago, our candidacy was considered to be a fringe candidacy. Media thought my hair was just beautiful, but other than that, they didn't think we had much of a chance. Well, the world has changed a little bit in the last 9 months. With your help, I think we can win here in New Hampshire on February 9th. We are running very aggressively in Iowa. I think it's going to be a close election there in their caucus night. I think we have an excellent chance to win there because we have, in both states, enormously strong grassroots volunteers. We have thousands and thousands of volunteers right here in New Hampshire, making sure that people come out to vote, because I believe if there is a large voter turnout, if we can really get democracy moving, I think we're going to do well here in New Hampshire, and I think we're going to do well here in Iowa. And if we do well in both of those states, I think, my friends, we are looking at one of the great political upsets in the modern history of the United States of America. And I think the reason we are doing well here in New Hampshire and in Iowa, while we're closing the gap nationally, is that people understand that in our great country, something is fundamentally wrong when we have a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. People understand that America is not about the top 1/10 of 1% owning almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. America is not about the 20 wealthiest people owning more wealth than the bottom 50% of the American people. America is not about giving more tax breaks to billionaires and cutting nutrition programs for hungry children. So what this campaign is about is not only addressing Citizens United and a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy, it is also dealing with a rigged economy, an economy in which the middle class for 40 years has been disappearing. We're in Vermont and here in New Hampshire. You all know this is true. We have people working not one job. Sometimes they're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs. You got moms working, you got dads working, you got kids working. We work the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. And at the end of all of that, 58% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Nobody thinks that makes sense. So our job is to create an economy that works for working families and not just a handful of billionaire campaign contributors. And when we talk about the issues facing this country, you may have read yesterday that last year was the warmest year on record, and that in recent years we continue to have warmer and warmer years. And you all know in this room that the scientific community is virtually unanimous in telling us that climate change is real, climate change is caused by human activity, and climate change is already doing devastating harm in our country and around the world. And I pledge to you that if elected President of the United States, I will lead this country in working with China, Russia, India, countries all over this world, in standing up to the fossil fuel industry, in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. I have 4 kids and I have 7 beautiful grandchildren. And you have children and grandchildren. Our job is to leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for future generations. And I will tell you something that is really, really alarming. And that is, we have a major political party. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called the Republican Party. And almost without exceptions, there are a few exceptions, but almost without exceptions, you have Republican candidates getting up there and saying climate change is a hoax. Donald Trump's assessment of the situation, being the brilliant scientist that he is that climate change is a hoax created by the Chinese, which shocked me very much. I thought it was the Mexicans or the Muslims, but apparently it was the Chinese who created this particular problem. Now, there's another point that I want to get to with regard to campaign stuff before we get into some other issues. And that is, you know, in the last week or 2 of a campaign, a lot of stuff gets thrown around. That's what politics is about. Media picks up on this stuff. And one of the arguments being used against me is that Bernie Sanders, nice guy, but you know what? He just cannot win a general election. He's up against the Republicans. My goodness, no way he's going to beat Donald Trump and these other candidates. So I am happy to report to you the results of a poll taken by WMUR and CNN just the other day. And here are the results here in New Hampshire. In terms of Marco Rubio, Secretary Clinton loses to him by 1 point I beat him here in New Hampshire by 18 points. In terms of Mr. Kasich, it's a tie between Secretary Clinton, Governor Kasich. I beat Kasich by 21 points. In terms of Governor Christie, Hillary Clinton defeats him by 3 points. We beat him by 23 points. And my favorite, the man who I would love, love, love to run against, Hillary Clinton defeats Mr. Trump by 9 points. We defeat him by 23 points. Now, it doesn't sound to me, now I know a poll is a poll, and that's true, and the world changes every day. Some polls are good, some polls not so good. But I'm not quite sure that with those numbers, the Republicans are all that excited about running against us. But it's not just here in New Hampshire. Not quite, but very strong numbers in matchups against Republicans in Iowa. And here's a national poll. Last national poll came out the other day. The good news is Secretary Clinton defeats Trump by 10 points. National poll, we beat him by 15 points. But that is only half of the story politically. You know, polls are polls. But here's the other half of the story, which is actually more important. I think it is fair to say, and no objective observer would argue with us, that for Republicans to win, given their disastrous agenda of denying the reality of climate change, of their desire to give huge tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, of their desire to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, the way Republicans win elections is when the voter turnout is very low. And last November of the last midterm election, voter turnout was abysmally low. There was no excitement, there was no energy on the Democratic side. 63% of the American people didn't vote. 80% of young people did not vote. And Republicans won a huge landslide victory. I believe that anyone who looks at Secretary Clinton's campaign and our campaign objectively, in terms of the turnouts that we're seeing, in terms of the energy among working people and young people, will say, this is the campaign that has the energy, has the momentum, and can create a large voter turnout to bring us to victory. And what a large voter turnout and an engaged base is about is not only retaining the White House, which is enormously important, it is regaining the U.S. Senate, it is gaining seats in the House, it is winning governor's chairs up and down and all over this country, which is exactly what we have got to do. So what this campaign is about is treating the American people as intelligent people, is about talking about the real issues that impact our lives. And let me repeat to you what I say all over this country, and that is no candidate, no president of the United States, not Bernie Sanders, not anybody else, can do it alone, cannot alone bring about the transformation that we need politically and economically in this country. Can't do it alone because the powers that be, whether it is Wall Street, whether it is corporate America, whether it's the corporate media, whether it is large campaign donors, these people have so much power that the only way we transform this country is through a political revolution in which millions of people begin to stand up and say in an unprecedented way that our government belongs to all of us, not just the 1%. And what that means, and I mean this very sincerely, I obviously will need you here on February 9th, but I will need you the day after the election, because what politics in America today is about a Congress which is very significantly controlled by the wealthiest people and the most powerful institutions in our nation. And time after time, what Congress does is turn its back on the needs of the American people. We need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Which in my view is $15 an hour over the next several years. Congress does not want to raise the minimum wage a nickel, and you got Republicans coming forward saying, you know what I think? This is what they say. They say we should abolish the concept of the minimum wage so that in high unemployment areas people can work for $5 an hour. Way out of touch with where the American people are. I believe, and the vast majority of the American people believe, we should have pay equity for women workers. No rational reason why women are making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. That's just old-fashioned sexism. We have got to change that. But that's not what the Republicans believe. I believe that at a time when real unemployment is close to 10%, youth unemployment much higher than that, we need to create millions of decent-paying jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, roads and bridges. That's what the American people want, not Republicans. I believe that in the midst of all of this massive income and wealth inequality, where you have major profitable corporations, in some cases making billions of dollars a year, and in a given year not paying a nickel in federal taxes, yes, I do believe that the wealthiest people and the largest corporations in this country will have to start paying their fair share of taxes. And yes, in the year 2016, where so many of our young people are finding it hard to afford to go to college, where millions of people are today trying to deal with very, very high levels of student debt and outrageously high interest rates, yes, I believe that in the year 2016, public colleges and universities should be tuition-free. That we should also substantially lower interest rates on student debt, and that we're going to pay for that through a tax on Wall Street speculation. You know, when Wall Street's greed and illegal behavior brought our economy to its knees, worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s, the middle class of this country bailed out Wall Street. Well, in my view, now is the time for Wall Street to help the middle class of this country. When we talk about issues like Citizens United, it's important to understand that not only are the Republicans not willing to overturn Citizens United, this is hard to believe but true, they want to make our campaign finance system even worse. Right now, this campaign season, the Koch brothers and others will be spending hundreds of billions of dollars on independent expenditures. That's what the Citizens United case allowed them to do through super PACs. What the Republican leadership wants to do is to end all limitations on campaign finance, meaning that the Koch brothers themselves can give directly to any candidate they want, $100 million, $200 million. In other words, they can make candidates official employees of them. My friends, this is an issue of huge consequence. I am the former chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. And in that capacity, I have worked as hard as I could to make sure that veterans get the best quality health care that they can and get the benefits that they all have earned. And the idea, in that capacity, I have talked to veterans who fought in World War II, fought in Korea, fought in all of our wars, up to Iraq and Afghanistan. And it is incomprehensible to me that people who have put their lives on the line and died to defend American democracy, we now find ourselves in a situation where billionaires can buy elections. Let me talk a little bit about senior issues, if I might, because these are issues that do not get the kind of discussion that I think that they need. For a start, when we talk about a disappearing middle class, let's understand that over half of the seniors, half of people between 55 and 64 in this country have no retirement savings. So when you look at a nation in which for many years real inflation accounted for wages have gone down, where people have been unable to save, right now over half of the people between 55 and 64 getting ready for retirement, they have zero in the bank. And you wonder why the American people are anxious, why they are angry, heading into retirement with $0 in the bank. And yet, despite that, my Republican colleagues, they think that we should cut Social Security benefits. Thank you. Now, I started a caucus a couple of years ago. It was called the Defending Social Security Caucus. And I did that along with some other progressive senators because it boggled my mind that you had virtually all Republicans and, I'm embarrassed to tell you, some Democrats who were talking about cutting Social Security. So we stood up and we worked with the AARP, we worked with the National Committee to Defend Social Security and Medicare, the Alliance for Retired Americans, all of the major senior organizations, and they did a great job. And what our message was is that when you have millions of seniors and disabled people and disabled vets trying to get by on $12,000 or $13,000 a year, no, you are not going to cut Social Security. And not only are you not going to cut Social Security, you're going to expand Social Security benefits. I know that I will shock all of you when I tell you that sometimes some folks who are involved in politics are not necessarily honest about what they say. Please recover from that shocking statement. No, it's not that Roswell was real. It's that politicians distort reality. Here's one of the areas where we have seen a lot of distortion from our Republican colleagues. When they go about saying how we've got to cut Social Security, what they say, well, Social Security is going broke. It's not going to be there. We're going to have to cut benefits. Answer is that Social Security today has $2.8 trillion in the trust fund, can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 19 years. Social Security is not going broke. Second argument that you'll see on TV is, well, you know, we have a really large national debt, and we have a deficit, and we've got to cut Social Security. But every person here knows that Social Security is independently funded through the payroll tax. Nothing to do with the overall budgetary situation of the United States. Funded independently. You have contributed as workers 6.2% of your checks, and your employer has put 6.2% is. So Social Security has no impact on our deficit or our national debt. Now, what should we be doing? What's the right thing to do? The right thing to do is to end an absurd funding mechanism for Social Security, which basically says now that somebody who's making $10 million a year contributes the same amount into the Social Security Trust Fund as somebody who is making $118,000 a year. That's wrong. So if we do, in fact, what then candidate Obama talked about in 2008, and that is lift the cap on taxable income starting at $250,000. What we can do is a number of very important things. First, we can make certain that Social Security pays out every nickel owed to every eligible American, not for the next 19 years, but for the next 50 years. Second of all, under this plan, seniors and disabled vets with income of less than $16,000 a year would see their benefits go up by more than $1,300 a year. A pretty good increase. And furthermore, we will deal with in that legislation, with the absurd situation regarding COLAs, cost of living adjustments. Anybody know what the COLA was this year? You know. You do pay attention to that, huh? Now, I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to laugh, all right? So I'm warning you, you're going to laugh, but here's what I'm going to tell you. One of the key ways that Republicans and a few Democrats wanted to cut Social Security was through a process called the chained CPI. Anyone know what the chained CPI is? Raise your hand. See, this is the way that folks in Washington get away with bad stuff, because they come up with complicated stuff that nobody knows what they're talking about. Here's what a chained CPI is about in essence. It says that the cost of living formulation, how we determine costs of living for Social Security today, is too generous. See, you laughed. Because you're wondering, how could it be too generous when you got a zero cost of living adjustment this year? Got me, I can't figure it out myself. But the theory has to do something like, if the cost of steak goes up, people will not be buying steak, they'll be buying chicken, which is less expensive. And if the cost of chicken goes up, people will be buying dog food. And if the cost of dog food goes up, people can buy cat food. But it is an absurd formulation. It is an absurd formulation, and its goal is to make certain that the cost of living adjustments that seniors get year after year is much lower than the reality of their purchasing needs. Now, what's the problem here? The way we do it right now is to lump everybody together. So you got 20-year-old kids who are going out and buying laptop computers. Well, you know what? The cost of laptop computers has gone down in recent years. Various electronic products actually has gone down. What do seniors and disabled vets spend much of their money on? Is it on laptop computers? Nope. What is it on? It's on food, it's on drugs, on health care. Those costs have gone up. So what our legislation does is create a segregated index for seniors. And it tracks what seniors are actually spending money on. And it's not flat screen TVs, and it's not electronics. It is prescription drugs, costs are soaring, healthcare costs are going up. If you do that, and you honestly track how seniors spend money, you will find that cost of living adjustments in recent years have been much too low. Let me touch on another issue that I know is of concern to many people in this room. And that is that in the United States, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And what that means is that tomorrow you could walk into the drugstore with a prescription and find that the price of the medicine you have been buying for years has doubled, it has tripled, and by the way, in some cases that is happening right now. And the reason for that is there are zero regulations on the pharmaceutical industry. They can charge any price that they want. Some of you may remember, I don't know if you do or not, it was late 1990s, I think 97, I'm not sure, when I took a group of Vermonters over the Canadian border to Montreal. Any of you remember that? Okay. Montreal's a beautiful city, but we were not there on that day to sightsee. What we were there to do is to show the world the absurdity of prescription drug pricing in the United States. We started off in northern Vermont, in St. Albans, Vermont, and we went into Montreal, and the bus had mostly women, working class women, many of whom were dealing with breast cancer. They had a lot on their minds. We got to Montreal, and we had arranged all of this. They bought the medicine that they needed, the same exact brand name medicine, not generics, same exact brand name medicine on that day for 1/10 the price they were paying in the United States and in Vermont. 1/10. And I remember, like it was yesterday, tears were coming out of their eyes. These are women who are fighting for their lives, didn't have a whole lot of money, and suddenly discovered they were paying 10 times more for the same medicine that folks a few miles away from where they lived were paying. But it's not just Canada, it's all over the world. And when I talk about a rigged economy, what I am talking about is that the pharmaceutical industry has 1,400 lobbyists in Washington right now, and last year spent over $250 million on lobbying and campaign contributions to make sure that we pay by far the highest prices in the world for medicine. Trust me, if I am elected President of the United States, the pharmaceutical industry will not continue to rip off the people of our country. And by the way, it's not just that we pay much more than the people of any other country. It is that in the last year, the 3 largest drug companies in America made $45 billion in profit. 1 out of 5 Americans are no longer able to afford to purchase the prescription drugs their doctors write. Is that crazy or what? You go to the doctor because you're sick, doctor writes you a prescription, you can't afford to fill it. Maybe you end up in the emergency room, maybe you end up in the hospital. Totally crazy. You got oncologists now writing Congress, and they're saying, my cancer patients cannot afford the drugs that they need. We have a serious problem with our veterans regarding hepatitis C. A company out there came up with a very good drug. They're charging $1,000 a pill. So when we talk about transforming our healthcare system, it is certainly telling the pharmaceutical industry that people in our country deserve medicine that they can afford to buy. Okay, I have talked longer than I should have, and we're going to have to hit the road soon, but I wanted to take some questions. Do we have any microphones here? Okay, ma'am, did you want to just stand up and be loud? We got a mic over there. A microphone is coming.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, I have been following you very closely, and I've also been visiting and listening to other candidates. Hillary Clinton at Keene State College said that fracking is okay some of the time. She talks about her damn solar panels, and I'd like to know how she's going to take care of those solar panels in states where there's a solar crisis with a solar cap, keeping people from being able to connect to the grid. So my question to you is, here in New Hampshire, where we're fighting the Ned Pipeline, that's just the battle. How are you going to help us win the war against fracking?
Okay, first of all, there are pipelines going through New Hampshire, they're going through Vermont, and they're going through Iowa, among other places. I oppose those pipelines. Unlike Secretary Clinton, it did not take me a long, long time to know that the Keystone Pipeline was a very bad idea. I was on board against that from day one. It doesn't take, a scientist to know that the excavation and transportation of some of the dirtiest fuel on Earth is not a good idea if we are serious about combating climate change. Now, I believe the bad news is what scientists tell us is we have a pretty short window of opportunity to transform our energy system. We got a Republican Party that is very worried about their campaign funds coming from the fossil fuel industry, and we got a fossil fuel industry fighting tooth and nail to try to stop us. And one way they do it is in state after state making it harder for people to go to solar. You were talking about a US senator who introduced legislation calling for 10 million solar rooftops. You're talking to a United States senator who has introduced the most comprehensive climate change legislation ever in the Senate, including a tax on carbon. So this is an issue. Look, it is, I want you just to think about this for a moment. 20, 30, 40 years ago, if the scientists are right, and if the temperature of this planet goes up between 5 degrees and 10 degrees by the end of the century, think about what our grandchildren will be thinking about our generation. And what they will be saying is, why didn't you do something? The scientists told you what was going on, and you did nothing, and you left us with all of these enormous problems. So this, to me, is very much a moral issue. If we are concerned about our kids and our grandchildren, we have got to be extremely bold and aggressive. And we know what to do. We know what to do. In Vermont, New Hampshire, we've been pretty good on energy efficiency. We've got to be stronger. The cost of solar panels are going down. In Iowa, they're getting 30% of their electricity from wind. We can do better than that. We know what we have to do. Let's have the political courage to do it. Okay. Question? Yeah, ma'am.
Senator, what specific reforms will you put forth to end corruption of big money in your first 100 days in office?
Good.
Thank you.
Well, the answer is everything that we possibly can. But let me pick up on that point. And it's the point that we started on talking about Granny D, talking about the 6th anniversary of that disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. Of the many things that I am proud of in this campaign, one of them is that when we began, a lot of the experts and the pundits said, well, Bernie, how can you possibly win an election? How can you possibly raise the money that you need to run a successful and winning national campaign, which costs huge amounts of money? You all know that. Talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars. How are you going to do it? And I said, well, you know what? I understand that if you have a super PAC, you can go out to corporate America and you can go out to millionaires and you can raise a whole lot of money. But what I also said is I do not represent the interests of corporate America or the billionaire class. I don't want their money. We will do it without a super PAC. So, today, I am the only non-billionaire candidate who does not have a super PAC. And how we have raised our money is revolutionary unto itself. You know how we've done it? We have received 2.5 million individual contributions, more than any candidate in the history of this country at this point in a campaign. And the average contribution is $27. How's that? So, to answer your question, we are going to nominate justices who will overturn Citizens United, and I certainly hope that I will have the opportunity to nominate a number. If necessary, we will work with communities and states around the country for a constitutional amendment. We will look at legislation like the Disclosure Act. See, when I put an ad on television, it always has to have, along with other candidates, you know, me saying, I approve this message. I want the Koch brothers to have their little picture on the ad saying they approve the ugly 30-second ads that they're running. Okay? So, trust me, I consider this to be one of the major crises facing our country. We will use every legal tool at our disposal to break the situation where money has so much influence over politics today. Okay, I see a hand right there. Ma'am, yeah, there's a mic right next to you.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. For your information, there are a number of musicians and artists in this audience, and this may not seem like a significant question to you, but to us, it's at the heart of what we do and why we believe in what we do every day. Could you speak to what you will do to support the arts in this country?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't see that as an insignificant question. And I worry very much that as school budgets all over this country get squeezed, guess who the first people who are fired? They're art teachers. So I'm an old-fashioned guy and believe that when we talk about human life and education, that art and culture are a central part about who we are as human beings. Artists in so many ways, and that's what art is about. We can't predict it. Explain to us who we are and talk about and show us the world in which we live. That's what artists do. They do it through paintings, they do it through drama, they do it through poetry. And I will tell you, I talked about Burlington, Vermont. You know what we did when I was mayor? We started a mayor's council on the arts. And what we did is we put money into the arts. We had concerts in the springtime almost every week. We helped support artists. So count me in as somebody who believes that artists play an enormously important role, need to be encouraged. So, Got a hand right here. Yep.
I know you've addressed some very serious issues. One that's germane to me in particular, and I think you've been briefed on his work, is Robert Putnam's work around, he's written a book about our kids and the opportunity gap that exists now, not just in economic inequality, but in opportunity inequality. And I'd wondered how you might address that in your first days of presidency.
Very significantly, in this sense. Let's be honest about, and again, you know, one of the reasons I am running for president is because so many of the very, very important issues facing our country not only do not get addressed legislatively, they don't even get discussed to a large degree, all right? And if you're talking about kids in general, let's talk about kids. I mentioned a moment ago that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we have millions of seniors trying to get by on $12,000, $13,000 a year. People who are vulnerable, people who can't work, people when you get old, you're likely to get sick. That's how we treat many of our seniors. We do even worse with the children. We do even worse with the children. This is the United States of America, a nation in which the 20 wealthiest people own more wealth than the bottom 150 million people. We are a nation which has the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, somewhere around 20%. If the kids are African American, maybe 35%. This is a nation in which every psychologist who studies the issue will tell you that 0 through 4 are the most important years of a human being's life. And this is a country which has a dysfunctional child care and pre-K system. A system in which those people who are working with the most vulnerable people, our little children, the 1-year-olds and the 2-year-olds, often earn lower wages than people who work in McDonald's. So, this is a nation in which 50% of the kids in our public schools are on free or reduced lunches. So what do I think? I think that anyone who loves this country, who is concerned about the future of this country, understands that we have to change our national priorities with regard to children. And what that means, having a top-notch child care and pre-K system so that when kids get into good public schools, they will not be behind when they're 4 years of age. It means that if any kid in this country studies hard and takes school seriously, he or she will be able to get a college education because we make public colleges and universities tuition-free. It means that if kids who are not academically inclined want to become electricians or carpenters or plumbers, they get the training that they need. It means, by the way, that we address this very, very high situation of youth unemployment because we will invest in education and jobs, not more jails and incarceration. So, thank you very much. Again, this is an issue we don't talk enough. Remember, and I always say this, if we were a poor country, we would have one kind of discussion, right? We'd say, look, it wouldn't be nice if everybody had health care, we had good schools. We're a poor country. We just can't afford to do it. We are not a poor country. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. It's time to get our priorities right. Let me just conclude. I apologize, but we've got another meeting down the road that I can't be late for. And I just want to say this. Here in New Hampshire, on February 9th, in the Democratic primary, this small state, my sister state, has the opportunity to make history. And if the people of New Hampshire are inclined to vote for me, what they will be telling the entire country and a lot of the world is that it is time in our country to end establishment politics and economics and to move this country in a very, very different direction. Thank you all very much.